So obviously, I'm going to have to sort of, have to talk about this. It's inevitable that I would have to. Um, Obviously, if you don't know what we've heard doing, we are going to be reducing the UK's foreign aid budget to, well, to boost defense spending. Now, I don't like it. I will be openly honest. I don't like it. I understand why they're doing it, given, you know, the current situation. Um, it is absolutely obvious to why. However, I would say the far better, and I think the more preferable way they should be doing this is breaking their fiscal rules, um, increasing tax or increasing borrowing to do it. I think that would be a far, far better way to go about doing it. However, I do understand why, of course, defense spending has to be increased. I think we all get why. I should hope you've all been watching the past couple of videos and understand why we are having to do that. you know, um, and like I say, by the next Parliament, we are on course for 3%. Now, I've said before, one of the big, I think, discussions should be, and should be having right now at the moment, because it never gets talked about. People more and more interested in the fact that, when you see this type of spending, that it goes up or down. And that tends to be where you see the conversation being had. Like, oh my God, defense spending is going up, or oh my God, defense spending is going down. It only really tends to be when this type of spending goes down. Very rarely indeed, even then, do you hear about what is exactly it is being cut. And I talk about this a lot more as we've talked about in the past when it comes to, oh, yeah, we want to, cut taxes, or we want to sort of, cut regulations. Well, okay, where exactly and what is it do you mean the government is no longer going to either do, or what is it you are going to cut? For example, whenever we've talked about the Brexiteers, there is a lot of those EU rules and regulations that, for example, cover health and safety, worker protections, worker exploitations, things like that, that all of a sudden, these Brexiteers go very quiet about when they don't want to talk about it. However, when it comes to sort of this defense spending rise, where should this defense spending be going? Well, I want that defense spending to be going on a rebuilding of capacity. So we need to have more, ammunition production facilities here in the UK. That is obvious, like first and foremost, that we need most of those types of capabilities rebuilding. Just a couple of days ago, we reaffirmed yet another big shell delivery for Ukraine. However, as I'm sure some people have seen, I think it was the Times, someone was saying that they did the math, and if you look at the rate at which artillery shells are being fired in this war, it's a very, very artillery intensive war going on in Ukraine right now at this very moment. That production from Europe, not even including America or South Korea or anywhere other countries that have pledged shell production, just Europe itself, those shells would last 3 months. So it is very, very obvious we need to up artillery production, or have the capability to be able to, up our production should we need to, or to have those facilities ready to go to able to increase production over what we are already producing. That is first and foremost very, very obvious, because you cannot, as this was very much I pointed out at the beginning of this war, there was one country in Czech, in the Czech Republic, that was basically the one and only NATO shell production for all of Europe. That was kind of worrying. You also saw at the start of this war as well, the huge defense scandal that happened in Germany. The fact that it came out, oh, well, if Germany was engaged in this war, it would only have enough artillery shells in reserve to basically fight for 2 days. These are the types of things that need to be relooked at. And I am glad, this war has certainly woken a lot of people up to the realities of production and capabilities when it has and does come to defense spending. So I do hope that this increase in defense spending does go to, you know, increasing that capacity, not just on defense spending as well, because we have to seriously have a look into that and really invest in that here, not only just in the UK, but across Europe as well. So when it comes to foreign aid spending cuts, you've obviously got to remember, we saw Boris Johnson obviously cut foreign aid from 8%, sorry, 0.8%, as I believe it was, down to 0.5. So we already had a decrease in foreign aid spending initially, and now I believe it's being lowered another 3%. So I believe we're going to now 0.3. And we have to acknowledge the realities of what that foreign aid budget goes. It goes to places like in Africa. It goes to places like, Afghanistan, where you see these places are very unstable. A lot of that money goes to helping these places become more stable. It funds anti-corruption efforts. It funds medicine, healthcare, predominantly in those countries. Cutting aid like that can have, bad outcomes. It goes to helping ensure farms, food, if there is a breakdown in food production, things like that. That's where sort of foreign aid goes to as well. Uh, Very important that we recognize and understand that cutting foreign aid does and will have, repercussions, that maybe those countries destabilize more. And if that destabilizes more, then that means, because, well, we are part of the UN, that means we will have more foreign UN peacekeeping missions, which in turn will now mean more money having to go into defense. Like I say, I think the more ideal solution would be to break the fiscal rules, to increase taxes or increase borrowing to help pay for this. Military sort of spending and diplomacy is, because that's basically where this foreign aid really comes under, do go hand in hand, and we should be funding both of these things, or making sure that both of these things are funded. Because I think there was a saying by a US general that basically goes under the lines of, well, if you cut foreign aid, you'll have to buy me more bullets. So we have to sort of really look at that, and I think that's something that we should wanting to acknowledge, that is the fact, that is the case, and that is something that we need to look at. And I do think we are, and I've said many times, this is something where we have to break sort of fiscal rules. And as I always said, you make up the fiscal rules. Rachel Reeves makes up the fiscal rules. They can always just go in our fiscal rules and just, increase taxes, increase borrowing. It's in our fiscal rules. So I do hope that we do see that eventually, but I think we need to stop making this being an either or case. Very much so. I think we need to acknowledge that these two things very, very much go hand in hand, because if you don't fund that diplomacy side of the stuff, then that means in the future you will see more instability in these other countries, and then you have to, well, spend more on defense. So there is a very, very negative sort of thing outcome, hopefully. But we are seeing, for example, Russia especially spend a lot more money on its foreign affairs stuff, especially in Africa, to destabilize. Very, very much focused on destabilizing a lot of these countries, so that then, well, it can send things like, its Africa Corps, or what used to be called the Wagner, into sort of, taking over those resources and those mines in Africa, which then has more problems, because then those countries don't then have access to those resources to then, pay for stuff. So we should care what happens in these countries, and we should care about foreign aid spending, just as much as a lot of people are waking up to the fact of, oh, we really now we need to, have a look at, defense spending. These shouldn't be two separate things that we think about, or one has to be sacrificed for the other. they should both be cared about very, very much so in these cases. So let me know what you think about this, because I think this is something that we should care about, I think, a bit more. There should not be, quite frankly, an either or case. These two things should be funded together and always be considered in parallel, working together, because if you have more diplomacy spending, means you don't have to have as much, defense spending, or increase that defense spending at a later rate. So let me know what you think down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.